In this video, I'm going to be talking about how I made this whale sculpture. So to start this whale sculpture, it all started with the bisque-fired terracotta whale. So inside my ceramics class about maybe a year ago now, actually it's been quite a while, inside my I went to get my associate's degree, and during that time I made a bunch of sculptures that I just didn't finish. Like in some of my past videos, I made a robot, and that was a sculpture I never finished and glazed, and this terracotta sculpture was one of them. So we were given 2 chunks of terracotta clay, and terracotta is a lower fire clay, and so you have to fire them, but you can't glaze fire. You have to use stains. Well, I have kilns on hand. They're not working. They're not operational. It'll probably be about another month or so. I'm hoping sooner, but until they're actually used or be able to be used, so they're functional. And so I decided I wasn't going to be able to fire or stain or do another low firing for this sculpture, and so I decided to break out the acrylic paints. And like I always do, I tried to make it more complicated than it had to be. But I really love the end result, so I'm glad I did. So I'll get to what I'm doing here. So basically what I'm using here is polymer clay. It's kind of weird to have to mix polymer clay with terracotta clay because they're very different, and so I wanted to make sure that you couldn't tell the difference between the two clays, and that they didn't look off in texture and like that. So I tried to make these little pieces as closely fitting to the style of the whale. And so basically what I'm doing is I made a little house, a little hut, and I made a rock that the house would be sitting on, and then it would be on top of the whale. And then I made a bunch of robotic parts that would look like they were attached, or that the whale was modified in order for living conditions. My idea going into this was a robotic whale that was flying, it was futuristic, and that there was someone on top of the whale originally. That was my idea. And I had made a little tiny figure to go on top of the whale, but it ended up breaking when I fired it, and it just didn't look nice, and so I decided to just go full, detail mode, and I just made a little figure. Basically what I did to make this easier on me is I made a little, I took a kneaded eraser, I wrapped it in tape, and then I put the wires, the armature for the little guy, inside of the clay, or I mean not inside the clay, the eraser, the kneaded eraser, so that it's easier to hold. And then I used an X-Acto blade and got really, really detailed and small and tiny, and made this little figure holding an anchor, which I quite like. After it was fired, it was very fragile, and so I broke it a few times, but I had to do some repairs on it, and then I got to the acrylic paint. So, like I said, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't noticeable that there was polymer clay on top of the terracotta clay. So I used super glue, and I used a bunch of mixed media sculpture supplies and stuff like that in order to make sure that the terracotta clay and I used paper clay later, like I used paper mache, and then I used polymer clay. I just acrylic painted them all like a black base coat, so then they all looked the same color scheme, so then everything fit together. And then I just went in and I did a bunch of dry brush. So I went in with a dark blue, and then I did a dry brush of a lighter blue, and just kept dry brushing and dry brushing. I added some detail, brought out the texture inside the whale, and then I did some. I painted all of the mechanical parts on the whale all completely black, or like a dark gray, and so that allowed me to dry brush, and then I did some washes on top of that, and then I wanted these pieces to look aged and used, so I added a lot of texture with the dry brushing, and I just built up layers and built up coats, and then eventually added as much detail I was looking for. And then, like I said, I had initially intended for this little tiny figure that I made, to stand on top of the whale, but I think the proportions were a little bit off inside this sculpture, so the guy did not look like he could even fit inside the house that was on top of the whale. So yeah, the proportions were a little bit weird. So I didn't end up putting him on top of the whale. I ended up making a base for the sculpture to sit on, as you saw in the beginning of the video, and then he was sitting on the bottom, underneath the whale, looking up at it. And in my mind, I think I like this more, just because he's definitely inhabited this whale to live in, but he ventures off of the flying whale, and there's a story there. I think I like it better than the figure just looking off into the distance, into the on the whale. So I like that better. All right, so now getting to the paper clay, or the paper mache, I guess you could say. So it's a weird texture I've never worked with before. So there's some paper mache that was super old, but basically you can use it to sculpt. You can use it as paper mache. You can, it's kind of cool, but I've never used it before. So what I did was, it's just this like pre-mixed bag, and it's just all dry, like a dry, like powdery like substance, and then you add water, a certain amount of water to it, and then I added extra glue to it, so then it solidified really solid and really hard and gave me a nice smooth texture to the rock, but also textured enough so I can dry brush and add a lot of detail, as you're seeing here. So I just kept dry brushing, doing some washes until I got the desired like rock look, or rocky texture, and then I added a bunch of fake grass and moss that I had on hand. I already had this grass from a few of my sculptures I've done in the past, so I just glued that to the rocks, and then I had to do a bunch of modifications to keep the whale standing. So I wanted it to fly, so I nailed, or I screwed a piece of metal, and I cut the piece of metal in order to connect to the wooden base of the sculpture, and then that allowed it to fly. Now I wish I could hide the metal a little bit more, but I am very happy with the way it's positioned here, and the whale can come off of the base of the sculpture, which is cool. I had to Dremel into the bottom of the whale in order for the metal to go into the base, so then it could fly. So it's kind of cool. I had a lot of fun with this sculpture. There was a lot of struggles with the proportions, like I said, but I think it came out great, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I just have a good time using acrylics because I get the desired outcome on my sculptures, and I just love this piece. It was a lot of fun to make, and I hope you like it too. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this inspired you in some way, and I will see you in the next one.